everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Narrated by Disney, or current Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it. Legends. Today I have for you Outbound Flight by Timothy Zahn. Am I actually going to like a Timothy Zahn book again? Who knows? You must find out. Long story short, yes. I actually enjoyed a Timothy Zahn novel again. I haven't really enjoyed a Timothy Zahn novel since the Thrawn trilogy. As, for those of you who don't know, I don't particularly care for Allegiance or Choices of One. There's parts in it I like with the Stormtroopers and stuff, and some of the parts with Mara Jade. But all the parts with the movie characters I really dislike. I really dislike the stupid is Mara and Luke gonna meet? No, they're not gonna meet, Zahn, because it's your own canon. It's not even the expanded universe. It's your own book that you keep trying to be it's your own thing. Don't do it. It's stupid. But and then there's Scoundrels, which I haven't read, but the premise alone pisses me off because it pisses all over A.C. Crispin's books with Han Solo. But whatever. I found Hound of Thrawn to be okay. It was an okay finale to the Bantam era. It wasn't fantastic to me. It was all right. Same thing with Survivor's Quest. So I have not had the highest opinion of Zahn as some other fans in the fandom do. I really love, and I will always attest to the Heir to the Empire, Thrawn trilogy. It's not perfect, but it is really good. Not a masterpiece necessarily, but it just hits all the right notes, I think. There's silliness in there, but it hits the right notes. And so I wanted to like Zahn. I wanted to love Zahn. Everybody talks about Zahn, but I just couldn't. Those other books they don't hold a candle to the Thrawn trilogy. But this is a book that I think does. Now, I don't think everyone will enjoy this book. I did. There are some things I think are a bit weird, but overall, fine book. Non-spoiler wise, what I'll say is this takes place again in between episode 1 and 2, 5 years after episode 1, and we have Obi-Wan and Anakin kind of thrown in here. They're doing stuff. They kind of get yeeted out of the book near the end, but they just completely get thrown out of the story and they're not even there anymore. Though what they did with it I liked, and I'll talk about that in spoilers. But with that, we go to the part of the book you paid it for, that you bought it for, which is, of course, Thrawn from the Chiss Ascendancy, not Grand Admiral yet. And, of course, we have Joros C'baoth in charge of this Outbound Flight project. We have George Cardass. We knew about him from the original Thrawn trilogy and other things. I forget where he's mentioned. But he's, big expanded universe character too, because of Timothy Zahn. And the Far Outsiders, which again was really cool. Having a mention of that again, because of course Thrawn's the one that initially teased the idea of a extra galactic threat, and then NGO took that and made the Vong. And this book was made after, all the prequel movies, episode 1, 2, and 3 came out 2006, I think. So all that information's out there. And of course all the NGO books are done. So he actually does, mention Verget and stuff like that, which I appreciated. Zahn playing nice with other books, making it even better, which I appreciated. And I thought it was really enjoyable for the most part. I really enjoy Joros C'baoth's character. One thing I don't really appreciate is how he is already kind of a jerk, which people have issues with. I've seen other reviews like, why does the Jedi allow him to be around? But it makes sense to me with the hypocrisy of the Jedi of the prequels, because he is arrogant and he's a jerk, but he's not inherently dark side by the beginning of this book. He's just full of himself, which is, a red flag. But I mean, to an extent, so was Dooku. Dooku's just more subtle about it. Like Juro Sabaoth is like things that Dooku would think but wouldn't actually say out loud. That's kind of Juro Sabaoth. But I mean, I always got the impression that the clone was crazy because he's a clone in the original Thrawn trilogy, which I guess in a sense he still is. It's just like there isn't much of a departure from the clone and the original. Like they're basically the same. The clone's just a little bit more on edge. But I thought there would be a bigger difference, but there's not really. Everything we get to learn about the Chiss ascendancy is really interesting. Now I know there's a bunch of Disney novels that delve even further into the Chiss ascendancy, and that's really cool and all. I'm not going to read it because it's Disney canon. If you like Disney canon, that's great. I hear some of Zahn's Thrawn books, especially like the ones dealing with his past, are more interesting than the ones where he's actually, a part of the Empire, which I think the Thrawn Ascendancy books are. But I'm perfectly content with what we got. Because again, this book doesn't really, you don't get like a chapter where it's from Thrawn's perspective, like I hear a lot of the new Disney books do. I think Thrawn works best as a villain because, I mean, he's not a villain in this, but he works best because we always get to like really know him through other characters, and we don't get internal monologues from him, or we don't get like chapters that are like, because all Star Wars books are like third person, but you have chapters that are clearly like following like the one character. You never get that with Thrawn. It's other people interacting with Thrawn, so you never really get to understand his thoughts or what's going on inside his head until after he explains it to you, which I've always liked about Thrawn, and I thought made him I think that's why having him die off in the Thrawn trilogy, works really well, because he stands out as a villain because he never gets a chance to really like lose. Like Darth Vader. Darth Vader's the man, right? But if you read the expanded universe, I mean, our heroes get away a lot. So, it kind of dilutes it a bit. But I really enjoyed the whole idea of the outbound flight and trying to explore like, unknown regions of space. It reminded me very much of Star Trek and the Final Frontier, which is something Star Wars doesn't really do, because kind of like most of the galaxy that matters has been like explored. You don't really get that many stories that are about exploring unknown places. I mean, you get a bit of that in Fate of the Jedi, but it's not like a lot. I enjoyed the finale to this book. I'm trying to not give it spoilers, because basically, there's this thing. The heroes, Obi-Wan and Anakin, are sent by the council to go not all the way to the unknown regions with Sabaoth, but are meant to like just kind of facilitate for a little bit. Sidious, of course, doesn't want outbound flight to get to the unknown regions because they'll come into contact with the Vong, and Palpatine doesn't want that. He doesn't want this galactic invasion. He's trying to take over the Republic. He's trying to bring in the Empire, so that can't happen. He needs to stop that. So he sends some dude named Duriana to make sure that stopped. And so all of that is really, really interesting, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it's overall, because it's already 8 minutes long, it's overall a book well worth your time. You may find it boring, depending on your tastes. I found it really enjoyable, though. The ending a bit, I didn't care for as much. Near the end, after everything with the outbound flight is kind of like, or I should say, Juro Sabaoth, and that all of that is done, and we deal with stuff afterwards. I felt like it dragged a little bit. But other than that, also, the end of the book doesn't really end, because there are some characters and stuff that doesn't get resolved until decades later with Survivor's Quest, which follows up on Outbound Flight. So there's that. But overall, I think this is well worth your time. It's one of Zahn's better novels. I mean, it's the Thrawn trilogy and then this, and everything else is okay or inherently bad. I'm sorry. But I do think it's worth your time. And if you like Timothy Zahn, if you like some of the books I bashed on, well then of course read this because you're gonna love Zahn's work because it's Zahn. Um, so definitely check it out. I'm gonna get into spoilers if you don't want spoilers. I know it's kind of vague, but you're much better off reading this book without knowing too much. I think it just makes the experience a little bit better. But anyway, gonna get into spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, leave. If you're a veteran or if you just don't care about spoilers, join me as I talk about some of the things that I found kind of interesting throughout the book. Um, so one, the beginning of the book, Cardass and his crew saved by the Chiss. We learn about the 9 ruling families of the Chiss society, which was interesting. We get to learn a lot about the Chiss in this book. Thrawn's art deduction, even back then, he's not as like, art. You can understand a species through the art. I mean, he says that in this book, but he's not like super obsessed with it. Like he's not super in love with it yet, but you can clearly see that passion's already there, which I love. And I love when he does the artwork stuff where he just like, oh yeah, well this species is clearly this kind and this and this and this because of how this painting was illustrated. Da, da, da. It's all bullcrap, but I love it. I love Thrawn's Sherlock Holmes moments. I live for it. Um, Palp's plots. His plots for days. So he, of course, wants the outbound flight taken out because, well, we can't have the Yusong Vong coming too early. It's not NJO. And, of course, he wants to become the Emperor, and that can happen if a bunch of Vong are attacking. Also, it's a good way of just killing a bunch of Jedi, because there's like 15 of them aboard, so win-win for him. Thras, we learn about Thrawn's brother, which is pretty cool. So that was interesting. Chiss Prime Directive versus Thrawn. This I really found cool because it gave me a big, giant Star Trek vibes. If for those of you who don't like care about Star Trek, the Prime Directive essentially in Star Trek is that you're not allowed to like involve yourself with like problems with a planet, like if they're dealing with political problems and suffering and slavery or whatever else on a planet, you can't like intervene unless they directly ask for help. Stuff like that. I'm making a very simplified version of what that is, but in this book, the Chiss have this whole thing where they do not do preemptive strikes. They are very for strike only if we've been struck, And with that, Thrawn's very, I will do whatever I need to do to protect my people. So if that's taking these guys down first before they do anything, I will. Because dealing with a potential threat now is better than dealing with it later when they're stronger. Which some people, I've seen other reviews. I'm not trying to compare my review to other reviews. It's just people are like, I don't see how he could become a part of the Empire through this book. I don't see that at all. I'm like, the seeds are there. What are you talking about? Like, he wants to do whatever it needs to be done to protect his people, the Chiss, no matter what. He may regret certain decisions, but he will do it without hesitation if need be. The Chiss is always going to push back on this. But you know who doesn't push back on that? The Empire. And when Thrawn eventually gets exiled, Palpatine, I haven't read it, the short story Missed Encounters yet, because it doesn't appear chronologically yet. But then you have an Empire that's fully willing to let you do what you feel is necessary to protect the galaxy from the Yusong Vong. Makes perfect sense to me. And even in the Thrawn trilogy, he may be a bit more villainous, only in comparison to our heroes in that book, because our heroes are opposed to his actions. But even in that book, I still sense that Thrawn wasn't inherently just being evil for evil's sake. He was only evil in the sense that he was opposed to what our heroes wanted. But even still, I forget exactly what happened in the Thrawn trilogy, but there was this character that sent the stormtroopers out and the men died, and Thrawn was pissed. He was like, I'm not Lord Vader. I do not send my men out recklessly. Or something like that. So Thrawn was clearly even then more complex. Right? So I can see the seeds of how he would come to work for the Empire in this book. It's not super obvious because this is still years away from when he would join them, but still, those seeds are planted if you just pay attention. I think, anyway. Maybe I'm stupid. Sabaoth on Infant Jedi. So this is interesting. Make no mistake that Juro Sabaoth is a piece of garbage. He is a jerk upon jerk upon jerk. He's one of the worst people ever to read about. He's almost as bad as Boris Kvala in this book. But he does have his rare occasions where he makes perfectly just and fair points. Like the Sabaoth on the infant Jedi thing. He's talking about like how that is, like that's a tradition thing. Why can't we train Jedi at the age of 10, at the age of 20? Why does it have to be infants? It's because of tradition, not because of what the Force says. The Force doesn't say anything about that. The Jedi do. And that was a fair point. It's in the same way that, how Luke would have his new Jedi Order, and he would have a range of ages. We had Screen, who was like an old guy already, and he became a Jedi, and he didn't turn to the dark side. It doesn't matter about the age. The Jedi of the prequels have a lot of rules that aren't necessary. And I can agree with some of Sabaoth's points. There are others where it's like, bro. But there are some that make legitimate sense, and I agreed with him, which is strange because I really hated his character in a good way. And so I just found the whole conversation he has with the crew of the Outbound flight during that particular part of the book really interesting because I did not expect him to make any fair points. He seemed like a cartoon villain for a good portion of it, but he actually made some good legitimate points there. So I appreciated that. Thrawn. Oh, this is great. Thrawn talks to Sidious. So he eventually gets into contact with Sidious, and they discuss basically what was previously supposed to happen didn't work out. So then Thrawn gets convinced to destroy Outbound Flight. And the whole thing with him and Sidious, which is, I loved it. I should also mention, I didn't write it down, but I love this so much, and I, like, even though they didn't need to be in it, I appreciated it so much. When Sidious finds out that Anakin is on the Outbound flight, you can see in that chapter how pissed he is. He's like, what? Why is Anakin there? And then Sidious goes out of his way, as Palpatine, to personally make sure that Anakin and Obi-Wan went to go do some stupid mission on a planet. I mean, it's not stupid, it's important, but to just go do some random mission on a planet to make sure that his pet project, his future Dark Lord of the Sith, his future Vader, would not be killed too early. I love that. It was a perfect excuse to just yeet them out of the story, but it also works so well with Sidious's character. Because if you read Darth Plagueis, you know that no matter how good Dooku is, he is only a placeholder. He is a placeholder for Anakin until he grows up enough for Sidious to go, okay, it's your turn. Because he's always wanted Anakin since he found out about him. He wants him to fall from grace, to be his apprentice. And that part of the book is a very small part, but it just baffled my mind that Palpatine came up with an excuse to personally go out there and make sure that his pet project wasn't there. I love that. Lastly, Thrawn gives the Outbound flight many chances for surrender. They, of course, Sabaoth, of course, does not. Sabaoth finally completely turns the dark side, starts choking him out. And so the Outbound flight must be destroyed. But not everyone dies. They, of course, make it to some planet and escape, living. So that way we can have the Avengers of Survivors quest happen decades later. But I really enjoyed the mercy that Thrawn tried to have and how, that kind of dissipated in the original trilogy. But yeah, overall, this book is a bit slow at parts, I have to say. But overall, I think the intrigue of it, the just trying to find out about these characters that are going to be in future stories, seeing a younger Thrawn. It's all just, it's really good. It's more, I can gladly say I actually really enjoyed a Zahn novel again, and I'm happy to say that. I'm proud to say that I don't have to bash Zahn anymore. But I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I read it, and I'm excited to see more of what the Star Wars Expanded Universe has to offer. Of course, up next being more Jedi Quest and some comics. So I hope you all join me for that. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Sharing episode a ton. If you enjoy Thrawn, make sure to give a subscribe because, of course, I love Thrawn. My second channel profile is Thrawn. And if you want more Star Wars Expanded Universe content, you can see it right here. Also, Halo, Star Trek, Dune, a bunch of other stuff I have in the works. So, yeah, thank you all so much for watching. May the Force be with you.